changemakers. Thank you for tuning into the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. I'm your fervent feminist host, Raven O'Neill, and I get the honors of sitting down weekly with diverse experts from all walks of life to explore ideas, opportunities, and strategies that we can all use to hack our way to better lives within patriarchal societies. If you're ready to hack patriarchal systems and structures, I invite you to join us and help move the needle. In today's episode, I have the honor of sitting down with Kathy Guillory. Kathy is a marketing executive with nearly 20 years of experience driving strategic growth, change management, and digital transformation for beloved brands. She's the founder of Bell Bear Marketing, a fractional CMO firm. Kathy is also committed to removing barriers for future generations of women to succeed in leadership roles and building a more equitable world for her daughters. Let's all give Kathy the warmest welcome. Welcome, Kathy. I'm excited to have you on the show today. Today, we are going to be talking about men and women dynamics in the workplace, especially coming from your marketing background. I think a great starting place is to just get a little bit of insight about your background and how you got here on the podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. So my name is Kathy Guillory. I'm a fractional CMO. And before that, I spent about 18 years in corporate America. So I worked for organizations of all different sizes, all through my 20s, all through my 30s. So definitely used to being the only woman in the room when it came time to important decisions, when it came to have both of my children. Certainly things changed a little bit, right? The dynamic changed there, both I would say in the leadership room and at home, as it often does. And so I'm really excited to be here and just talk to you about my experience and how it's shaped where I am today.
I'm excited to have this conversation because I feel like a lot of women have that same experience of the dynamic change when you get married, have children, whenever you have a major life change. And I feel like we don't talk about it enough. I suffered the same thing where it just felt like a lot of pressure. Your kids get sick, you have to leave. And that was way before COVID. So we didn't have the kind of work relationships we do today. So diving into that a little bit, can you tell me about the transition from that to entrepreneurship and what maybe happened in the boardroom and in the office that might have made that shift?
Absolutely. So to back up a step, I completely agree with you on the life pre-COVID, because that's exactly what happened, right? I had kids literally the year before. My oldest was born in November of 2018. So 2019 was that first full year she was in daycare. She went to daycare when she was 8 weeks old, and 8-week-olds in daycare get sick literally every other week, right? Literally, she was sick so much. She was sick all the time, and not badly sick, just the usual, right? The sniffles, I have a cold, I have a flu, can't go in. And all of that is incredibly disruptive. And this was, again, before COVID. I was the only person on the leadership team with young children. Most of the leadership team was surprisingly made up of women, but I was the only one with young children. I was the only one with children who were certainly sick all the time. And it was very much this dynamic of I was for countless phone calls. They would all be in a conference room together having a conversation, and I would be the odd one out on speakerphone, right? So you're trying to shout over people. You don't really have that. Even the Zoom dynamic, which is just makes life so much easier, right? Where you can see the person, you can raise your hand, you can jump in chat. It was literally a conference room, 7 other people with a speakerphone in the middle, and I could maybe hear 80% of the conversation. And that was my very first year. It was my very first year of motherhood. And it was jarring, right? It was jarring. And I would say at the end of that year, I was unceremoniously demoted. Right. It certainly was not billed as that. It was billed as a leadership transition. We had a new CFO come on who was outside the organization. The current CFO was retiring, and his scope of responsibilities was really broad. I mean, he was in charge of all accounting, all finance, all collections, all IT, and all marketing. And I was like, what? Like, you're a CFO. Like, hi, what do you know about marketing? And the answer was very, very little, right? Really nice guy, very well-meaning, but knew very little about marketing. Like at that point, I probably forgot more about marketing than he was ever going to learn, right? And it was, the change was communicated as, oh, it's restructuring, and all of this, right? But I am almost certain that it was in large part due to the fact that for so many of those meetings, for so many of those key discussions, the conversations were happening in a physical room. And I was the only person who was, calling in remotely on a large speaker. So that was my very first experience. And then a few months after that, COVID happened. And when COVID happened, I was actually pregnant with my second daughter. And my youngest was home. She was 15 months old when the world shut down. So my experience there was literally the world goes to Zoom, which was a lot better, right? It was a lot more equitable, certainly, because now we could see each other. Now we can talk to each other. But something else that was working to my disadvantage is I had a, toddler at home who learned how to climb the coffee table and climb the kitchen table in the middle of all of this. Whereas a lot of other people, right, they either had older kids or they had kids out of the home, right? So that dynamic, it changed, right? It was no longer I'm on a speakerphone in a conference room with all of them. It was now I'm having to go off camera because I have to go grab my kid, or I, have to reschedule a meeting or call in on my phone because it's in the middle of nap time. So just very, I would say, still that same feeling of being the odd one out, even though the technology caught up with the times and the dynamic changed.
Oh, I this is going to be such a good conversation because I feel like that experience, the pandemic, was different for everyone, especially like across the stages of parenting. And since this is hacking the patriarchy, we didn't talk about discussing this in advance, but I want to look at what that looks like as a partner because there is this dynamic. All the kids were at home.
Of
And the
course.
expectation was that for most of the women I know and speak to, the expectation was the women were still going to take that on, even though we were working.
Yes. Yeah, I would say a little bit of that. So at the time, and we've both changed several jobs since then, but at the time, my husband was an attorney. He still is an attorney, but he was practicing law. And all of that same day, the world shut down. And I was essentially sent home with my laptop and definitely pregnant with a 15-month-old at home with no childcare, expected to work full time uh, and, adjust to the new normal. All of his court meetings went remote as well. So now he was no longer traveling, but he still had to make those court appearances. He was still meeting with clients. He was still going in front of a judge. And my job was less formal, right? In the sense of I wasn't going in front of a judge. My meetings were, in a lot of them were internal. They were with a leadership team. And so we certainly did our best to try to divide and conquer, right? We would come up with like a schedule of, okay, I have these calls, I have these calls. And he was great because he was physically here. So I could, physically hand her off when there was an opportunity, but there wasn't always that perfect one-to-one alignment, right? Because my schedule was also easier to move, right? My meetings were more internal. I could take a call with the video off. I could, move a one-on-one or cancel something until later in the week. Whereas his was, hey, set in stone, right? You have to be present in court to defend XYZ client at XYZ time. The judge is not going to be late. And the judge is also going to be a lot less forgiving with a toddler, climbing on the back of your chair screaming, give me a snack right now. So we definitely experienced some of that. Even though, all the external factors aside, right, the division of labor in our household has always been very equitable. Both of our kids now there is no default parent, right, which I've always kind of prided ourselves on. If they need something, they know they can go to daddy or they could go to mommy. It's just whoever's free. They don't have kind of that like preferred person for the specific task, which I think is a great, reflection of how we've parented over the years. But in a moment, there are varying degrees of availability. And I think that's what we discovered, right? It was easier to move. So my schedule was the one that got disrupted.
You threw out a hack in there that I want to pinpoint because it wasn't maybe the topic that we're talking about, but the equitable parenting for the listeners that are tuning in that have not had kids or have very small kids, that is something that's going to serve you so much in the future. I know that for my parenting journey, I tend to be the very mothering parent and I was very like let me take care of it first. If I need your help, I'll let you know. And now it's me all the time. It is always me first. it drives us both crazy because my husband's like, you can come to me, but they're like, oh no, we're gonna go to mom first. So for those tuning in that don't have kids or have very young kids, do that now. Equitable
Do that
parenting.
now. Do that now. Do that as early as they're conscious, right? As early as they're like awake enough to know, right? And it's not to say that they don't have their favorites of the week or wherever else, right? If I'm the one who punished you today and sent you to time out in your room because you were bad at breakfast, you're probably going to prefer dad for a couple hours this afternoon, right? Like that's reasonable. That's to be expected, right? Or, if dad took your stuffed animal away for, nap time last week or whatever, like you're going to prefer me for a couple hours, and that's okay. It's just to say that if something is wrong, like if you fall, if you get hurt, if you have a need, right? I need a snack, I need to go to the bathroom. You will just grab whoever is closer because you know that both of the parents can help you with that task. Like there are very, very few tasks in our household that I can think of that are person specific, right? The only one I can really think of is historically, I'm the one who's removed splinters, right? Just because my husband gets a little bit more squeamish and I will just, have him hold their hand down and I just do it, right? Like it's just this mom instinct of like, whatever, right? I'll take care of it. But there is no, that's like, okay, only mom does this or only dad does that. Which means, if mom has to travel for a client meeting for a couple of days, like it's business as usual and dad knows what to do. And the kids know that it's that he can handle it as well. And that goes vice versa, right? If he needs to work late or if he has to go into the office for something, like it's not a big deal, right? Because I know what to do and I can take care of them. So it really, I think, sets everybody up for success if you start that way from the beginning.
Yeah. We went off on a tangent there, but I
No,
enjoy
that's
because
fine.
that
I
is
think
a
it's a good
good
one.
hack that
Sure.
we have not covered on this show yet. So just took a little detour.
I
Circling
love it.
back, I do too. So good. Circling back to the conversation specifically about marketing and about dynamics, I do find it interesting. So I want to rewind a little bit and get a little bit of clarity on your background. You had said that there were a lot of women in the leadership roles. Was that the same job during COVID that you? I find that so fascinating because I do find that actually, I do not find that. From my personal experience, when women are the leadership roles, there tends to be the expectation, usually in my experience, has been better versus, you know,
Yeah. I think Yeah, because they know, right? And I think a little bit of that is generational, just in my experience, right? And I've certainly worked with fantastic women leaders over the years, so I don't mean to, group everybody together, right? At all. I'm just talking about this particular organization. It was a leadership team. There were 8 of us on it. Actually, there were 8 of us on it. There were 6 women. And in one of the cases, actually, the CEO was a woman who was the primary breadwinner for most of her career, right? And she was older. Her kids were adults. Her kids were in college. Some of her kids were getting married. And during her kind of early career development days, her husband was the primary caregiver for the children. So this kind of expectation was, there's somebody else to take care of it. And there are very few executive women who have that type of support, right? I think there's a study of how like something like 70% of C-suite men have somebody at home taking care of the logistics, but like, it's in the single digits of the number of women who have that type of support, because it's not common, right? Um, and so I think the expectation there was very much like figure it out, right? I remember same organization. I was there for about a year and a half. And I went to go talk to our head of HR when I found out I was pregnant. I had some questions about the family leave policy. And the way, not to get into details, but the way our PTO was structured is I essentially had to use all of my paid time off before I could access all of my unpaid time off, which meant I was giving birth in November, at the end of November. And so I would be coming back from leave after 12 weeks with literally 3 days of paid time off for the rest of the year, with a newborn in daycare. And so I had that conversation and I was like, look, I have 5 weeks of PTO, right? I don't care as much about not getting paid while I'm on leave. I just want access to the time off. Is there any way I can save some of that time off to have access to it later in the year when my kid is inevitably going to get sick? She's going to daycare. It's a petri dish of germs. Like, this is going to be disruptive. It's going to happen. And the answer I was given with a very straight face was, I came back to work 4 weeks after having all of my children. You're getting 12 weeks off. What's the big deal? And I paused and I was like, you also had your children 40 years ago. It's like a lot has changed since then, right? Like the world has evolved. But it was very much this expectation of like, yes, it's hard. I did it. So what are you complaining about? Like it's almost like we've made it easier. You have all these things. We've already done all of this. Why are you still complaining? And I wasn't complaining. I was merely just asking like, hey, I'm in a position where I could afford to take some time off unpaid, and I was willing to do that just to preserve my ability to take time off later. Because you know what? I only had 3 days of PTO in February. And then what did I do the rest of the year? I worked from home with my kid. And so that is the reality, right? And the reality is like I was in a position to do that, but there are so many women who can't. I had a coworker at the same time who was in a much more junior role, right? And she, came back, had 3 days of just very similarly, had 3 or 4 days of PTO, and she ended up quitting that job because she needed to go somewhere else, right? Before the end of the year, she was gone. And that happens so often is it's just so short-sighted to think that that's going to be enough and that mindset is really going to retain your employees, right? Because it doesn't. So many people leave. I read this years ago, but there's a very large number of new parents, of new mothers who end up quitting their current job to go find a new job, very similar job in the first year or after the first year. And I would venture to say so much of that is based on the systems in place, right? And how much support you got and how much flexibility you had coming back.
Ah, gosh. I mean, I don't want to get into a
No,
parental
no,
leave conversation because I
no,
could
no,
go
no.
down
Because
that
of
rabbit
course,
hole and
I feel like I have.
well, no, no, no. And I'm glad you did because that's the other thing like for the women or the soon to be parents listening in, like those are things you actually have to be strategic about, like that you don't think about until you're in the moment. And then even that, like 12 weeks, I I want to say I got around 12 weeks as well. And I just remember thinking, oh, that's plenty of time. And then you're in it and you're like, this was not enough time. My child is going to daycare. She's still so small. She or he, in my case, it was a she, so small. You
Hmm.
don't realize it until you're in it. So
Of
even
course.
those people listening, you might get 12 weeks. Be strategic.
Right. Right.
There's another hack. Be strategic. If you're going
Be
to have children, be
strategic.
strategic
Yeah.
about your
Be
PTO.
strategic. Absolutely. Be strategic. And yeah, the other thing is health insurance, right? And it was like, oh, if I have a baby at the end of the year, like I meet my deductible at the end of the year. And then, your deductible resets in January and all of your like, newborn visits are now not covered.
Yeah.
Which is
And I
another
mean,
part of this, right? Because there
your
are a lot of
timing.
newborn visits. My
Yeah.
timing was just brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is really hard, right? You have all this time off and now you're, oh man. Or even like my husband, I'm an entrepreneur, so I don't have PTO. But my husband's is use it or lose it. Like at the end of the year, it doesn't transfer over. Some jobs I've had in the past, it rolls
Right,
over. His
right,
does not. So
right.
if I was if I was in his position and you didn't plan it correctly too, you might not make the most of it in that maternity situation.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. There just needs to be I think these rigid rules just don't work for everybody, right? And so I think the more flexibility, for me personally, right, the more flexibility I had, more the more supported I felt over the years in the role, certainly since becoming a parent. And I think that is absolutely why I chose to go down the entrepreneurial path, right? I can still do meaningful work, I can still do interesting work. Now I set the terms, right? I set the times I'm available. I set yes, I don't have PTO, but I have days that I'm just not available. And that's kind of take it or leave it, right? I let everybody know really early on, and then I just disconnect and the world goes on. And that's a really good feeling, right? To have that, to have more control over your time. That's priceless.
I wanna drill into that a little bit more. I do want to get to the marketing conversation of
Yeah, that's
products
fine.
and services, but I also want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit more because I don't think we talk enough about the shift too from corporate to entrepreneurship and how you it's a different balancing act. So,
Of
depending on
course.
how that works for you, I wake up really early in the morning and I work really early before my kids are up. I take them to school, get that done. I come home, I work some more. I get off work at 3 o'clock because I have to pick them up and we have to do homework and all the things. And then I go back to work once everybody else settling in for the evening. And so I think kind of looking at maybe even recommendations, hacks you might have when you're jumping into that, deciding how to. I loved it. I had an episode where she said it's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration.
Sure,
And I did
absolutely.
love that. So what that might look like, what your experience has been and what you might recommend.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the person and your working style, right? So for instance, I would get absolutely nothing done at 5 a.m. Right? I'm not a morning person. My husband is, and I admire people like you who can do that in the morning. But I just don't. I'm not at my best, right? I need my coffee. I need a little bit of screen scrolling. Like I need to go for a walk, right? My body needs to wake up for my brain to wake up and start functioning. And so I know that that would not be my optimal time. So I sleep in, right? I sleep in till the kids get up, and at 7 o'clock they come into our room. They have little light timed alarms, and so we get them ready for school. We snuggle for a little bit, get them ready for school, get them out the door. I take them, and then I come home and I get ready and I hop on and I start working like at 8:30. Typically about 8:30 is the time, and then I'll work. I try to not have meetings first thing in the morning, because that is part of my most productive time. So if I'm working on deliverable for a client, if I'm working on a presentation for a proposal or something similar, right? If I'm writing content for my website or LinkedIn, I'll do that first thing for a couple of hours. And then I'll jump into meetings, to conversations. I try to keep Mondays and Fridays free of meetings. It's not to say that I don't have Monday and Friday meetings. I do. Like this is Monday, right? For instance, it's not to say that if there's an emergency or if something comes up, right, I don't jump on and take care of it. But as a general rule, right, I try not to do standing meetings on Mondays and Fridays because it frees me up to do deeper, more meaningful work, whatever that looks like that week, right? It could be for a client. Some weeks it's for myself. Some weeks it's literally I just want to take a Friday off and go do nothing, right? I have the freedom to do that as an entrepreneur, and I try to build time in for that. But that also means my Tuesday through Thursday are pretty busy, right? I have back to back as a fractional CMO. Part of the value prop in that is I am an embedded part of the team. So I lead the marketing team and I sit on the leadership team. So I have direct reports, right? I do their performance reviews. I sit in on leadership discussions and I'm there to oversee the execution of the plan. So I have 3 people on the team now for with my current client. They report to me. So we do one-on-ones. I meet one-on-one with the CEO. I'm part of several different cross-functional projects. They all have meetings. We have leadership meetings once a week. We have strategic planning sessions. So all of that, right? That just means because I don't do meetings on Mondays and Fridays, most of that gets compressed Tuesday through Thursday. And I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with that. I know that the schedule on those days is going to be a little bit busier. I still try to start, around 10:30 if possible. And I try not to have meetings go after 4. I just find that I need a little bit of time to go pick up my kids, right? They go to school and then they go to aftercare, which is on site. They love it. All of their friends are there. Actually, starting next year, they're going to be there together, which is even better, right? They'll kind of have that sibling dynamic. And then I know that, I leave about 4:15, 4:20 to go pick them up. And we come home, we make dinner. Thankfully, they don't have homework yet. They're a little bit too young for that, but eventually I'm sure it'll be homework. And then that's kind of our routine, right? And then if there's anything big I need to do, I will hop on after hours, like after they go to bed. And my brain just works a little bit better to do that in the evenings versus in the morning first thing, right? I know that I'll be more productive if I do that at 8 o'clock versus 5 a.m.
So you threw out 2 hacks there that I want to highlight. The
Please.
first one is scheduling for when you work best for that task, because we talk about time blocking a ton and scheduling on certain days, but the time blocking, knowing you do certain things better in the morning and in the evening, is something that I don't think we look at enough as entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
don't
I agree with that.
even remember what the second point was now that I went down there. I do. I think I will. If you are willing to come back, I would love to have you back to talk about how to become a fractional
Yeah, I would
employee
love to.
and or fractional consultant, because I don't think we talk about that enough. And fractional is a newer term I feel like that's become very popular,
Hmm.
but the actual process of it is for those people looking to make their next move, if they are in a C-suite position or a directorial position, inserting themselves that way or marketing themselves as that. But that's, I
Absolutely.
think, a conversation for a different day.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. It's been such a journey, and I love it. I think there's so much. To me, it really is the best of both worlds, right? Usually a more permanent engagement than, or not permanent. It's a longer term engagement than a consultant. And I have some materials I'm happy to share as well. I've sort of developed them over the last 2 years, just in marketing my services, right, and learning how I talk about them. So typically, I would really describe a fractional. The difference is, you're somebody who comes in, you onboard yourself, you onboard really quickly, you're embedded within the team, you're leading the team from within the company, right? You represent the team. Like I get requests for media interviews, I do the team's performance reviews, right? So I'm as embedded as can be. And I'm somebody who's an executive level professional, right? Whereas a lot of times if you're getting a consultant, you're getting a consultant for a specific project, right? We need SEO help, we need help with content, we need a marketing plan, we need something very specific. And the consultants are not always leading the team, right? They usually come in, they do the project, they do the documentation, the training, they hand things off and they're gone. And so there's a bit of a distance there, right? Whereas like I'm actually here, like I'm if there wasn't on site, I would be on site, right? But the difference is they just have access to me for an X number of hours a week, right? So my current engagement, it's up to 20 hours a week. And then that's it, right? It's actually a little bit more fluid. We do 80 hours a month. So that gives us some flexibility if I, want to take vacation one week or if I want to do something else, right? There's also a lot of flexibility around if we can roll some of those hours over for specific times of the year. If there's a big product launch or, entering a new market or something like that, we can save those hours and have my support more hands-on for that timeline.
Yeah, we'll have to have a whole episode on that. I
Yes,
think that
please.
the
I
listeners
think it's
would
great.
love that. Yeah,
Sure.
it's a good topic. I want to make a little bit of a pivot into the actual male patriarchy dynamic in marketing as it relates to product and service development. I know that we had talked a little bit about, I don't think it was R&D, but just kind of those beginning stages of creating a product or service, what it's going to look like to take it to market, and the difference of men and women being involved in that process.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point when it comes to marketing, right? And it starts with R&D. It starts with knowing your customer, right? Really, like who is your customer? Who is your audience? And if you don't have a member on the team, it does not have to be the person in charge, right? But if there's nobody on the team, if there's nobody on the R&D team, or if there's nobody on the marketing team who is of the same demographic as your customer, you're really going to struggle, right? Because we tend to come up with products and services for ourselves, right? There's this bias of, uh, I have a problem and this solves my need, right? Well, does your audience have the same problem? I think one of the examples of this was a couple of years ago. Bic, the pen company, came out with a pen, right? They had like a ladies' pen, and it was literally exactly the same pen they've had for 80 years, but it was pink. And I saw that, and all I could think about, and it was like 30% more, right? Because it was a pink pen. And all I could think about was like, seriously, like, is this a joke, right? Did this launch on April Fool's Day? It didn't, by the way. It was a very legitimate product. And my thought around that was like, what problem are you trying to solve, right? Like, do women write differently? Do we need a different pen? If you're going to come up with something, like have it be talk to women, right? And have them say, oh, I need a pen with a different, with more cushion, or one that writes differently, or one that I can hold better, or I need a pen that doesn't smudge, that has fast drying ink because I'm left-handed, right? Like solve an actual problem for your customer. Don't just make it pink, right? For the sake of making it pink. Do an upcharge audit and then say it solves a need for that audience. Because you know what, men and women, we all write the same, right? We all write the same, and we all need the same writing instruments. So let's not fabricate problems. Let's make sure that there is a person in the room who can actually like raise their hand and say, oh my goodness, this is a really stupid idea. And I don't think that happens enough, right? I've been in a room and I've actually said that before. I've also had people on my team who've brought that up before, and they'll say that. Like, that's the time to do it, right? I think when we talk about like diversity of teams, right, and diverse teams performing better, which has been, just reported time after time, right, in each study, like when you have people from different backgrounds, they tend to problem solve differently, and they just come up with better solutions. And ultimately, their results end up being much higher than their counterparts. It's because of this, right? Like our brains are all wired differently, and we have different lived experiences we can bring to these conversations. And if everybody looks like you, and if everybody has your same group think perspective, then you're going to come up with the same solutions, and they're not going to be always reflective of your audience.
Yeah. Uh, we do we do on this show, I imagine, get a fair amount of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs just starting out. And you might not have a team to present diversity of thought. Do you have any hacks for, I know that you can journey map, you can do all these things to really dig in, but do you have any recommendations if you're a solopreneur, very small team, and you don't have the people?
I think part of it is have a know your audience, right? So do as much audience research as you can, do as much journey mapping as you can, and then do a quick focus group, right? Find a couple of people, find them in whatever your product is, right? Find them in Facebook groups, find them in the LinkedIn community, find a couple of people who would be the end users of whatever it is you're developing. Just have a candid conversation with them, right? Offer them, $25 gift cards to Starbucks or wherever else, right? Try to get that potential user feedback really early on. And pay for it if you have to, right? And these focus groups are probably the best way to do that. Actually go to the source and say, if we were to come up with this, would it have any value, right? What if it looked like this? What if the name was this? I've led a lot of focus group discussions throughout my career. I've participated in a few. Actually participated in a few of them when I was in college. Once you're in marketing, they don't let you in anymore. It's kind of sad. Once they know that you do this for a living, um, you're not
You
going to
bring too
get
much
selected.
psychology to it.
Yeah, it's almost like, lawyers never get selected to be on a jury. It's a little bit of that. You know too much about this process. But really try to gather that feedback. Do a quick survey. There are lots of wonderful survey tools that you can do that are relatively inexpensive on a per user basis. YouGov is a really popular zero party data one where you're actually building surveys and asking the end users. I think SurveyMonkey has a couple of simple tools as well, right? Where you have to pay for it, but it's not terribly expensive on a per unit basis, and you actually get that market validation early before you really go down that journey of I'm going to go build this pink pen.
You also, I love that you said that it was, I think, what, 15-30% more? There's that pink tax. Like, oh
It
yeah,
was
we're going
that
to make
pink
something for
tax.
women
It was
and we're going to charge them more.
yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's the dye. It's the dye. I guess it's the dye. I don't know. Maybe it's the marketing.
Pink is just way more expensive. That's all it
It
is.
is. I love it.
We're coming up on time. This has gone by so fast. I had sent you a couple questions we could go over, and based on our discovery call for this podcast, for this recording, I had presented a question that I really do want to ask, and that is, what does hacking the patriarchy mean to you in your daily life, and how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love it. First of all, I love that name, right? Like hacking the patriarchy. It's just so brilliant. And I'm sure you get like feedback like, oh, well, is it anti-men? No, it's not anti-men, right? It's just anti the system that says that men are in charge, right? That men are by default always in charge. Obviously being a woman, obviously raising two daughters, I think it's really, really important for me to kind of break that cycle, right? By the time my daughters go on and become professionals and start pursuing their education, whatever format that looks like, right? I don't want it to be assumed that the men are in charge just because they're men, right? Just because there's an old white man in the room, right? Does not mean you should call him doctor. Sort of, I would love for those social norms to change as much as they can. I think one of the ways that I do that is by highlighting different perspectives and highlighting women in leadership and really I would say being very transparent and very honest about some of the challenges that I faced, right? Being a woman in the corporate world, um, some of those patriarchal forces that I had to encounter, even from women, right? There is a fantastic, fantastic book. It's by Rebecca Trazer. It's called The Good and Mad Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger, where she says that white women who enjoy proximal power from their association with white men have often served as the white patriarchy's most eager foot soldiers. I think it's just so powerful. The book is great. It's a great read if you're into, just kind of history and women's feminism movement. But there's so much of that, right? Women hold up their patriarchy too, right? We think we are conditioned to operate and think and work in those systems. Just like my HR director who said, well, I went back to work after 4 weeks. What's your problem? That's patriarchy, right? That's who doesn't matter who it's coming from, right? Even if it's coming from a fellow woman, a fellow leader, it's still those mindsets. And so I try to approach life and leadership and leading others from the mindset of, what would I have wanted from a leader in that moment, right? So when even people I manage in a fractional capacity, when they come to me and they have a personal issue or a child is sick or whatever and they need a time off, I try to pause for a minute and think about it through the lens of in that moment, if I were them, when I was them, right, what did I want? And when I wanted someone to say, take care of your kid, log in whenever you can, right? Take whatever time you need. It's not, I need you here for the 10 o'clock call or else. Really putting on that lens of just because I didn't have that support doesn't mean I can't offer it for this next generation that's coming.
I think you made an excellent point there. If you are in a position to change something that didn't sit right with you, do it. Don't do the same old shit just because that's the way it was done. That is how we create change.
Right. Right. Given that choice, right? Somebody asks for, an afternoon off, and it's actually something a current person on my team with the client, right? Something she would do very early on. She has a young child. And so she would be like, can I take tomorrow off? I got to take my kid to the doctor's appointment. I was like, yes, you may, but in the future, right? I think I only told her once. I was like, in the future, don't ask, right? The message isn't, can I take tomorrow off? It's, hey, Kathy, I'm taking tomorrow off. I'm taking my kid to the doctor's office. Hey, cool. I'll see you in the afternoon, right? Or I'll see you on Tuesday. Even just the language we use, right? Especially when you're talking about something like time off, you have plenty of time off, right? You have flexibility. We have flexible schedules already, right? You don't need permission to go do something. You are not asking for permission, because if you're asking for permission, you're giving me or somebody else a chance to say no. You are informing someone, hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow afternoon from this time to this time. And then the only logical response is, okay, got it. Good luck.
That was brilliant. I hope everyone listens to the whole
Thank
thing
you.
because the
Thank you.
brilliance was right there. The whole
Thank
thing
you.
was brilliant, but that
Thank you.
was such a point. I love to wrap up the show with each guest giving me 3 hacks. We've covered everything from being in that corporate as a woman and being a young mother to marketing. So I'll take anything you got.
Yeah. So I think the first one is the one I just mentioned, right? So be the change you want to see, right? Be the leader you wish you had, and try to leave the world a better place for the next generation. I think another one is struggling a little bit. I think the other one is some of these equity tasks, right? That equitable playing field at home, right? And that's going to work to your advantage. So as much as you can set that foundation to have your partner know how to deal with the day to day, right? If you are sick or if you are out of town or otherwise incapacitated for a couple of days, right? Have your partner be able to really jump in and into the thick of things and do the day to day with your kids. And I think the third is model some of those behaviors, right? Part of it is as a leader and as someone, all my clients know I have kids. I talk about them. I incorporate them into my stories or lessons learned throughout the day. I try to also live and model some of these behaviors. So if I say, hey, take Friday off and don't log in, guess what? If I'm taking Friday off and I'm still checking in and I'm on Teams and I'm on Zoom and I'm taking calls here or there, I'm not modeling good behavior, right? I'm saying one thing, but I'm showing you that the expectation is you still have to be accessible. So really challenge yourself to model that good behavior. And if you are going to encourage your team to take time off and to really unplug and disconnect, they're going to look to you to see how you handle that.
That was such a good ending point because yes, you're welcome. That was such a good point. Even my last leadership role in corporate America, that I struggled with that. I was fine with saying, no, take the day off, go be with your children, take your vacation, do that. I could not model it myself, no matter how much I tried. And in hindsight, that was a killer. So that's an excellent point. For those tuning in, how can they reach out, find you, connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Kathy Guillory. You can also find me on my website. It's bellbearmarketing.com, and I'm there posting regularly.
Excellent. I will put all of that in the show notes. Kathy, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. For all the juicy deets on this episode, be sure to check out our show notes or give us a holler on Instagram at Hacking the Patriarchy Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support this podcast, don't be shy. Please share it with your friends. Sharing is caring after all. Lastly, if you'd like to lend your personal support, please take a moment to tell the world about it with a review on your favorite streaming platform. We'd be forever grateful. Tune in again soon to enjoy a brand new episode of the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. And until next time, keep on hacking, my friends.